Hello. So we're going to get started now. Sorry for the delay, but our guest speaker here was held up due to traffic. So my name is Bernard Lee. I'm the CEO and co-founder of GlassQube Co-working, one of the partners for this series of events, the Founders School that we're doing together with NYU. I don't have any prepared notes. I'm just kind of going to wing it here. So NYU and GlassCube have been partnered now for a while, trying to focus on cultivating and developing the local entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think is a good way to put it, because I think NYU and GlassCube are focused on two very different segments of the market. I'm focused very much on SMEs and cash flow positive businesses, and startAD obviously focused on the other end of that spectrum of cash flow negative or early stage startups. But together, I think we have a pretty good coverage of the market in terms of content, in terms of being able to support and grow the ecosystem. And I think there's probably some faces here that know me and know that I have sometimes been a bit negative and tough on the startups, and I think that that's warranted. But whatever, it is what it is. But Robin and I decided to work together to put this series of events place because we still felt, I think, mutually frustrated for different reasons about the ecosystem in Abu Dhabi, and we felt that we could continue to work together rather than independently to help and continue to build the ecosystem for our own respective interests and our respective focus on the different ends of the market. So that said, when we worked on curating the speakers that you will experience over the course of the several weeks, I felt very strongly that the speakers had to be experienced entrepreneurs themselves. And the reason for that is because I get very frustrated when I go to an event and I see, a consultant that's only been a consultant for their whole life, or an academic, a very smart academic, but they've only taught and read textbooks their whole life. They've never had any skin in the game. They've never lay in bed, sweating, lying in terror about not being able to pay their school fees, not being able to pay their mortgage. Is their business going to fail? If you haven't gone through that gauntlet, if you haven't lived that dread, absolute dread that I can't even explain to you if you haven't gone through it, then you don't have any, I think the credence of what you can share to an entrepreneur is very, very limited. You might have great academic context, you might have great consulting context, but if you haven't had the terror of not knowing if you're going to live or die the next day, then you have to take that advice with a very large grain of salt. And that's why I spent a lot of time when we curated our speakers to make sure that speakers that I got on board were entrepreneurs that I knew had gone through the same experience that I've gone through. And because entrepreneurship is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. I wanted to use the F word. It's absolutely effing terrifying. It is tough. And the sexy side of being an entrepreneur, Silicon Valley, the NASDAQ,
Elon Musk,
Elon, Hyperloops, whatever. Yeah, it looks great in the journal, looks great in the Times, looks great in TechCrunch. But the reality is, it is really, really tough. It is very scary, extremely stressful, and very unpleasant. Very, very unpleasant when you're going through that yourself. Read about it is one thing, to go through it is something totally different. And so I really felt it was important to have people that have gone through it to share their experiences with you from the context of reality, not a text. So that said, here's a real entrepreneur, someone who's actually done it, gone through it themselves successfully more than once. Tarig Sheikh, I won't call him a serial entrepreneur, but he's an entrepreneur, and I think he's going to give you guys some fantastic insight on the journey from, I think you don't want to say ideation, but early stage startups through execution. So please help me give Tarig a warm round of applause.
Thanks for having me. I'm all mic'd up, actually. Yeah, I'm good. Cool. Well, thank you very much for that intro, Bernard. And I really also, again, just want to reiterate something that I think both him and Robin have been super humble about, which is the fact that one of the most important things we do is ecosystem building, and that's contributing back to the ecosystem. And Abu Dhabi is a very, very young fledgling one. But it's an important one to me personally, and I'll share with you later why. But I mean, basically, it's like sort of this is sort of stuff that they do for free, that I do for free, right? Our time is money, a lot of money. But we want to do that to give back, to make sure that we can contribute back to everybody else as much, because if you guys win, we win, and the whole world wins. That's how we do what we do, right? Okay, so I'm getting a clicker in a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to have to do some of this manually, so bear with me. Before we start, I just want to do something. Can I ask randomly half the people in the room, thank you so much, just leave it there. Half the people in the room to do this. Okay, everyone's doing it. That's awesome. We have good participation. And then the other random half, just to do that, to bring your hands together. Cool. Just bear with me. Perfect. Okay, I got some couple of shots of you, what looks like you're clapping. So even if I give a shit presentation, I'm going to post it on social media and be like, awesome, awesome. I'll do a Trump, right? Hugest turnout forever. Great, great standing ovation. Cool. Okay. So that's my joke. That's pretty much it. No more jokes for the rest of the presentation. All right, who am I? Who the hell is this crazy fast-talking dude? I do swear a lot, and honestly, I don't mean to offend anybody. I have mild Asperger's syndrome, I suspect. So apologies in advance if I do. I'll try and suppress that genie. But a little bit of background. I actually grew up here, in Emirat, in the UAE. I grew up in Abu Dhabi, believe it or not. So I think that was me in my first attempt of a company, Orange Coca-Cola, probably my first failed startup. I'm actually a molecular biochemist. I'm a scientist by training. Studied at Oxford. Sold my soul, became an evil investment banker. Sorry about that. In the House of Lehman. Sorry about that. Ended up building the trading algorithms for the real estate portfolio. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was one of the guys like carrying my stuff out in boxes in September 2008. And I think to me that was the realization that I was going to work for the best idiot that I know, and that would be me. I guess the rest is history. I started 5 startups that I talk about. One I've sold, one has been acqui-hired. One continues without me and is doing quite well. Actually, that would be one of my case studies as well. And 2 like mega blow-ups as well. So the failures are important. My North Star, my driver is I'm passionate about creating change. If I've got momentum and I'm helping people, then really that's what gets me excited personally and gets me out of bed, whatever guise that is. And my North Star is my 2 boys, my 2 kids who drive me crazy, but that's again one of my biggest drivers. I want to leave the world a better place for them, I hope. Cool. That's me in a nutshell. Okay, so many of you want to become entrepreneurs. And you heard the guys that there's a lot of sort of fluff on the media about how sexy and exciting and cool it is. And most people will tell you that, you have to have a great idea, right? You start with this amazing vision, yeah? That's where most people start with it. And then you need to get like this awesome A-killer team, right? That's going to execute it, right? And once you have that, you just got to plow through it through sheer force and grit. You're going to do it, okay? And you're going to create something out of nothing. Yeah? This is usually the typical story. I think it's much more like this. That's what entrepreneurship is really about, if I was going to summarize it in a photo. Yeah? I think this is a photo taken of Wilfred Owen, famous English poet. His most famous one is Dulce et decorum est pro patria more. It is not sweet and fitting to die for your country, which I think is a beautiful summary of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. You're literally in the trenches fighting for your life, and it's not easy. So if you have a queasy stomach and you can really you want to make a difference and you're willing to take calculated risk being the key word here, then entrepreneurship is something that you should explore. It's amazing. If you're in it because you're tired of having a boss and you want to be your own boss, then no, don't go into entrepreneurship because you actually end up having more bosses. Believe it or not, whether it's your employees or your board or your investors or whatever. So don't go into it for the wrong reasons. I want to make a lot of money or I want to be my own boss. You don't. Trust me. But if you want to make a change and you see something that you can make better and you really feel it's worth your time, then go for it. Okay. So the teams approached me and asked me to do, I think, a pretty unfair request, to be honest with you, if I'm going to be honest. They pretty much said, can you please do the whole, really condense like an entire sort of week's course into the space of an hour, which is how to take your company from 0 to 1, right? I know I've seen the lineup of other speakers who are coming in, and some of them are awesome. I think you guys have Asim coming in next week, and he'll be talking about ideation and creation. He's like one of the best, right? And so he'll sort of help you like design thinking around problems and things like that. And then you've got other really prominent speakers coming in about scaling and all that good stuff. But mine's I think, the trickiest one, because it's about taking your company from 0 to 1, right? From I've got an idea, I've got a bit of money, I know what the problem is, how do I get past that? I think the most difficult and fun part of setting up your company. So there's a lot to compact there, there's a lot to absorb. So apologies if I skim through some of it very quickly. As Bernard said, I like to relate it to practical experiences to make stuff make sense. I think teaching entrepreneurship is a bit like teaching surgery. The surgeon better have cut up someone in the past. It helps a lot. You would trust that person, right? So I'm trying to make it as practical as possible as we go along. So I'm going to start with one of my companies called Not Standard. This is not working, so I'm just going to have to bounce. Okay, so I'm going to start with one of my companies. Let's use it as a case study, two actually. The first is called Not Standard, and I used to say that that's in the business of creating pride. What did we do? I'm wearing the product with me right now. We used to make custom-made suits, and we used to sell them online. Custom suits online, right? E-commerce business, we started a couple of years ago. This was our value proposition, and I'm going to stress this and keep repeating this. This is very, very important. This is the problem that we solved. It was right here. So on the left is what you typically found, you'd usually see Americans coming off the boat, they'd be wearing these horrible, what I call pajama suits, right? And you'd be like, oh my God, what are you doing, right? And what we don't realize, what we take for granted in the Middle East and in Asia, is actually we have access to tailors, right? So we used to custom suits. And we started a hypothesis, myself and my two American co-founders, and asked ourselves, would people, customers, men, be willing to pay a price where they would get a custom-made suit, right? So the before is off-the-rack luxury. That's what they were used to, going to Brooks Brothers, paying $600 to $900 per suit, getting inferior wool, and it's not custom-made, right? Our tagline is buy our suits were made for you, not for a mannequin. And the after is we're offering them a suit that competes on everything. It competes on price, it's unique, everything is perfectly tailored to their body, it's customized, it's embroidered, you can have all the gimmicks on it. And that's how we started our hypothesis. So when we were thinking about do we enter this market, we did the maths and we found that in the United States alone, the total suit market is $6 billion. And that's really important. This is a big, big market, right? So whenever you're looking at starting a business, you generally want to do something that's big, that's going to have a big, big impact, right? It's not going to, you don't really want to venture into a market that's only like, $1 million each, because that's as far as you'll grow, yeah? Otherwise, it's just not worth your time. You're looking to create impact, the biggest impact possible. Believe it or not, when we started Not Standard, its first iteration was selling cowboy boots online, right? And then we told one of the co-founders, like, that's stupid. Let's do suits. Let's do something even harder, right? And you'll hear that theme starting again and again. So how does it work? You'd browse the website, you could customize your suits, you choose the peach versus not Chappelle, anyone who knows custom suits, and I see a couple of you there would know what I'm talking about, and then we'd get your measurements. And we have a variety of different ways, but the coolest way was the webcam. So we developed the tech where we'd ask you to stand 4 meters away from the webcam on your laptop, we'd take your photo, we'd ask you to hold your CD player, because it's the same uniform size throughout the world, we'd use that as a reference point, and then we'd take 4 photos, many more actually, and then we'd create a 3D rendering of your body, and then we'd model that suit and the way it drapes over your body, and hey presto, we could model your suit and sell it online. That was the theory of how we started. We'd assemble it. We used to start in Dubai, in Sharjah, manufacture there. Now we actually have factories in Hong Kong and mainland China. And when we first started, this is actually taken from an investor deck about 2 years into the life of the company, we were doing about $1 million in a quarter, and we're super excited by that. Now we're actually making about $1 million every month, and on days like Black Friday and Cyber Monday, which is huge in the US, we make $1 million just in that one day. So we've had a lot of growth. We've raised a lot of capital from the likes of Fadi Randour and Arif Nakvi, and that's actually a success story from the Middle East going out into the United States. Now we have offices and showrooms in Bloomingdale's, New York, Dallas, Dubai, Houston, LA, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. But out of all this noise, bullshit, this is the most interesting one I want you all guys to remember. 2/3 of our customers have never bought a custom suit online before. Okay? And I'll explain why that's the most important data point there after we started to validate our business. 2/3 of our customers have never bought a custom suit before. Yeah, this is just a part about building PR, because this is a particular one, we're building a fashion brand. So we've got a whole bunch of famous people to wear our suits. That's Jon Stewart wearing our tuxedos in the daily shows when they won the Emmy win. And we built a lot of partners over the time. It took time, but we built them. And we started right here in Dubai. So I'm going to be using not standard in a lot of the places when I explain it. And then the other one, which is also a wildly different business, was an HR management platform that I originally called Athan, named it after my son, because he gave me the idea, that it would actually disguise the insurance company. Anyway, we started that company. It was a pain point, grew it, and sold it after 8 months of operations. So that was one we're quite excited about. So a lot of people tend to say, Tarig, can you see the future? How do you know which thing to punt on? Where do you put your resources? They're so limited, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think I have a magic ball, but what I do think I use is a tried and tested, I think, method that reduces the risk that you're taking, reduces the risk of failure, okay? In fact, a better way of seeing this, how many of you here have a startup? Cool. How many of you here are thinking of starting a startup? A good number. Okay. So for the ones of you that have already started a startup, are any of your startups generating decent revenues per month? Okay. So this is a great way to think about your company. You are the CEO of a failed company. It's failed. Everyone starts a company and they're worried about their idea and they're excited. And I say, what are you excited about? What are you worried about? Your company's de facto state, day one, is failure. You have to unfail it, right? That helps you think about how quickly you need to unfail it and what you need to do to unfail it, okay? I think that's a subtle but very important way of framing it. This is a fact. 90% of startups, companies fail in their first 3 years of operations. Accept it. You're not special. You're not divinely chosen by God. You're not the next Elon Musk. I hope you are, but the chances are you're not, okay? So what can you do to minimize the chances of failure or unfail your company and increase your chances of success in the shortest time possible with the least amount of resources, right? Okay. So why do some succeed and why don't? Luckily enough, there's been some studies done behind this. So Bill Gross, very well-known, famous venture capitalist, actually did an analysis. Lots of maths, lots of smart people looking at their portfolio. And they looked at the winners and the losers. And they compared them. And they tried to see, is there a pattern, right? And they named basically the 5 major ones that everybody complains about. Number 1, ideas. It's the idea, right? Uber, taxi, hailing cab, great idea. Airbnb, who would have thought? Rent a couch, right? The next one is the team. Got to be execution team. It's all about the team. If the team can do it, that's the difference between a winner and a loser. We've heard that many times, right? The third one is the business model, finding that unique, special business model that no one else saw. Fourth is funding. Money, 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 money. If I'm going to ask most entrepreneurs, what do you need? I need money. That's the thing they complain about. And then the last one is just dumb luck, timing. You got lucky, timing. So actually, let's do this as a show of hands. How many of you here think the most important thing in the success of a startup is ideas? Great ideas, okay? How many of you here think it's all about the team? Bit more. How many of you here think it's the business model? Okay, about the same. How many of you here think it's money? Few, interesting. Usually that number is much higher. And how many of you guys think it's just dumb luck, it's timing? Couple of you, okay. And the answer is time. So he looked at an analysis of his most successful companies and least successful companies, the bombs and the elephants, and he found that the vast majority of the time, it's just timing. It's just dumb luck, right? 2008, financial crisis. There are people trying to do Uber, but they just came at the right time. Same thing with Airbnb, where people were price sensitive and they needed to make money, right? There was always social, there was always social networks before Facebook. There was MySpace and others. But why did Facebook win when others didn't? Timing. There were a couple of other factors as well, but timing was a big one. The next one was team, then idea. The bottom of the run was funding. The least important thing was money. Yeah. So what do you do, right? Like if timing is everything and it's really, really hard and the chances are against you, fuck it. Let's just all go home and never bother with entrepreneurship. Why should I bother, right? Oh shit, that was today. Poor dinosaurs missed Noah's boat. So what do? Do you give up on it? Well, no, not really. There's actually a light at the end of the tunnel. There's really hope. And I think this is it. This is the secret. This is one of my favorite slides. People forget this. It's a quote by Steve Blank. A startup is an experiment in search of a business model. Super important to think this way. Your startup is really just an experiment, a wild punt, a hypothesis to be tested in the real world, to find out whether you bring value to the customer. And if you do, you could be onto something. If you don't, no problem, you move on. Yeah? Okay. A lot of people make this mistake. They have a product looking for a problem. They have an idea looking for a problem. They have money looking for a problem. Yeah? They're trying to seek a problem. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't build something and then try and look for a problem. Just look for a problem and then try and find solutions. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers. Yeah? Okay. So you start with a problem. I've broken it out to define what the problem is. And that's really sort of the ideation stage. What is the problem? How deep is it? What kind of solutions? Just complete brainstorming, guesstimating, a lot of guesstimating, right? And Nassim's going to give you a really cool course on design thinking, I think, next week. Then the next stage is what I call evaluate. So you're trying to do what I call the customer product fit, which is something that's totally neglected. You get a lot of people talk about BMCs, business model canvas, stuff like that. But I think the customer product fit is probably the most important thing, and I'll touch on it in a bit. And then the last thing is build. The last thing is actually value prop. Now, what do most people do? They have an idea. They think they know the problem. They immediately jump to building something, and they think they've solved it, right? Unfortunately, that's your de facto typical human behavior, right? But I really think spending time with the potential customer to understand the problem is like the best thing entrepreneurs could do in their early days. Rather than build and spend money on building and all this other cool stuff, and I'm building my website, and I'm just waiting until it's perfect, until it's ready. Does anyone say those sort of things to themselves? Yeah? I mean, I used to make those mistakes too, right? Don't do that. It's like the worst thing you could ever do, okay? So the most important thing is defining the customer's problem, really understanding it, finding out like what's the customer's done to solve that problem. So you'll have conversations in your interviews. And for example, on Benepo, the HR platform, I'll be talking to the business owner, and they don't really care, right? And they push it down to the office manager, and I talk to the office manager, and then they start complaining to me about how they track employees' holidays. I'll be like, so what do you do now? She's like, I use spreadsheets. Wow, that's a lot of spreadsheets. He's like, yeah, can I see? Be curious. And she'd open up like 50 folders and 50 files, and I'd be like, oh my God, you're tracking all of this through this mess? Yeah. It's like, so, like, I'm trying to be helpful. If I give you a platform where you could manage all these people, holidays, et cetera, everything else in one place, and it's stored in the cloud, you'd use it? Yeah. Would you pay for it? No. Okay, but all those are data points. They're really interesting, right? And is the problem compelling? Will they pay you money to solve their problem? And really, your first goal, and again, there's no building here whatsoever, your first goal is to try and find what's called the problem-solution fit. Try and find, in Arabic you say, I guess maybe the reason I've had some success in this is, Bil-Arabi, my parents used to call me mashkalji, which means like a problem maker, person who goes out looking for problems. And that's really what you want to do. You want to be looking for a problem and then trying to solve it. Because if you bring other people value, they'll compensate you back in that value. It's a really important concept. I can't help repeating it. So have we found a problem that lots of people want us to solve? Is there a burning desire? Or maybe a massive cost? It's really expensive, it's a waste. Or maybe just a frustration, right? A lot of the stuff we do nowadays, especially with technology, are time savers, right? And time is honestly our most important commodity. Let's be honest, really, more than money, more than anything else. All we have is time, and our health. And then the other side of it is, does your solution solve the problem in a compelling way? Is it intuitive? Is it natural? Is it easy to use? Is it low cost? Is there a price saving, an advantage, operational saving? Is it simple, right? KISS, humans like, we only have a certain amount of brain power and energy we can use in a day. Like it's limited, believe me. And the more you can save people from making decisions, the better it is for you. Men especially are super sensitive to this. We don't like to think, right? Women are much more robust, they think much more, but men, we don't like to think. If you give us something without thinking, we'll take it. Okay. A lot of this stuff, by the way, is in Steve Blank's Startup Owner's Manual, which is an awesome, awesome book. I highly recommend anybody get it, especially if you want to go into this. It's like a playbook manual. It's like a Bible. It's great. Okay. So I would recommend also that you start by identifying your early adopters. Does everybody know what that means, early adopter? Okay, the early adopter is someone who would bend over backwards to use your product or service. Like they're basically the one with the biggest headache with the problem, right? They will take your product that's so buggy, that's so crap, but they don't care because they're acutely suffering from the problem. You're not giving them a vitamin, you're giving them a cure. Okay, you need to find out your early adopter. So even as soon as you launch your company, as soon as you start, I have a hypothesis that men want to buy custom suits online. Yeah, custom suits. You identify that pain. Where are they? Where do I find them? How do I sell to them? Before you even build anything. And that's what we did, actually. We built a really crappy website, and we just put it out there. We had no factories. We had these huge America flags and Burj Al Arab hotel photos, which we're going to cease and desist later on. And we just put it out there. And then we did a sort of a channel deal with Groupon and Living Social, and we sold shirts and suits here and in the US. And in the space of 7 days, we had 100 suits to deliver. Oh shit. But it proved, it supported our hypothesis that men will buy custom suits online. It supported that idea, which is a crazy idea when we thought about it, but it became reality when we conducted a very cheap experiment to show that we did. Now, of course, we suffered a pain I never would have wished on my enemy afterwards, and had to deliver 100 suits 2 weeks later, and we're running around Burj Dubai until 4 in the morning, but it was a wonderful learning experience, and lots of stuff went wrong, operationally, etc. But we learned from that experience, and then we built a product, an e-commerce site that suited what we need. We knew what we needed to do. So it's all about finding those early adopters when you start. And here's, I think, is another really useful tip. I think this is a big startup killer, or business idea killer. I think most businesses fail to give their customer segment, their early adopter, an appropriate value proposition. So find your killer value proposition, whatever it is. Find your killer solution to the problem. Okay, how do you create a killer value prop? How do you find out what it is? No, it's not like that. We're not guessing, it's the exact opposite. Has anyone seen the VP Canvas? Yeah, a couple of you are nodding. So this is not, I want to be careful here and just say you must use this in order to be successful. No, this is just a framework. It's a framework. And it works for some people beautifully, especially if you're like me and your thoughts are all over the place and you're very easily distracted. And other people hate it. So it really depends on you and what kind of tools you like to use. But it's a tool, right? I think it's a very useful tool to stay disciplined and ask you the really, really, really hard question of what is my customer solution product fit? Forget about all the other bullshit, okay? And I'll touch on it a little bit, but basically it's made up of the customer side, which is on this side, and the product side, which is on this side. And it starts with this side, the customer. Most people want to start with the product. No. Okay, and I'm going to give you some real-life examples. Does anyone know what this is? Yeah, Cronuts. It's a photo, New York High Street, where it is. I think I'm somewhere in there buried. I was in New York, and I was like, I must try this cronut. I must find out what this stupid craze is about. And that was really, really interesting. It was an interesting experience. Was it worth the cronut in the end? You probably no. But who would have thought if you'd mixed a donut and a croissant, you'd end up with some viral, crazy, crazy product? Now, I think the gentleman got lucky, eccentric, but lucky when he did that. So I'm going to use another example, actually. Who knows what this is? Yeah, it's a cow, domesticated bovine, Bovius bovius, or whatever it's called. Okay, now imagine we're cavemen, and we see our first cow, right? What kind of cool stuff could we use? How could we use this cow? What kind of products could you make out of the cow? What kind of businesses could we set up out of the cow? Come on, shout them out. Okay, so we could kill the cow and make meat. Short term, interesting, I like it. Milk, a bit more long-term. I like the way you think more. Okay, cheese, yes. Now we're making derivative products. I like it. We could breed the cows and make them, but then we're just breeding cows, but okay. Leather, more cheese. Okay, you're French, I could tell. Come on, guys, go.
We can make actually using the cow dung manure for the plant.
Yes, right, we can use other cow products, cow manure. Yeah, I don't know what your obsession is about breeding cows, but sure. What about energy? Could we use the cow for energy? Yeah? Yep, methane gas. You can actually ferment the fertilizer again and make energy out of it. What about biotechnology? What about medicine? Come on, guys, think big. Yeah, we use cows to actually make antibody proteins and certain medical products. So honestly, like if you go nuts with this, there's a lot of stuff you could do with the cow, right? You can use bone marrow for gelatin to make gummy bears, who knows, genetically engineered liver parts to transfer into humans. They're doing that with pig, totally gross. But that's the kind of stuff that you could do with a cow. So it's almost infinite, right? So it's a bit overwhelming if you're going to start a business or you got a product. Like it's infinite, the possibilities that you do. So what do? And actually, when I started this question, almost everybody started with what you do with the cow. And that's your typical human mistake. Let's just say that it's not customer-centric. When I asked, what can we do with the cow? No one responded with, what do the customers want? No one asked, am I in a place where people can consume milk? Because one thing I could do is milk, but are people allergic to milk? Could we do milk? Right? We all started here, because it's easy. No one started here. And it's really important that you always start here. If there's just one thing you take away today, it's just that, okay? So I'm going to give you some more detailed examples. With Not Standard, the e-commerce e-tailers, as I said before, we started with a hypothesis. Yeah? The scientists amongst you will know what that means. Will men buy custom suits? Will they do so online? Et cetera, et cetera. They have to be testable. Yeah? The one thing I love in every company I've worked for, whenever I'm having a chat with the CEO, is, especially with smart people, they love to like get into their imagination and, no, I think customers will do this and customers do that. And it's so easy to stop arguments. You literally say, let's test it. In almost every argument that I have, I always end it with, great, let's A/B test that. And it annoys certain people like my wife like crazy, because I'm literally A/B testing everything and arguing about everything. But I think in the world of business and ventures, it's a really, really important skill set. The MVP, minimal viable product, that's a term that people use to basically summarize the way at which you can test your hypothesis. Yeah? An MVP is not the most basic form of your product. It's not. An MVP is the best way you can confirm or deny your hypothesis. That's the easiest way to do it. And I explained to you before about how, how we used to set up a website and sold stuff on Groupon. Actually, it was even more basic than that. I used to call friends who were coming in from England and the US and say, I'll make you a suit. Can you get your wife to take your measurements? And I'll teach you on the phone how to do it. And then when they arrive, I'd put it on them and I'd learn from that process, right? So it doesn't actually cost a lot of money to do your testing. In fact, my guesstimate of starting any business, any business concept is about $10,000, 36,000 dirhams. If you can't prove your hypothesis in that very little amount of money, then don't pursue it. It's a waste of your time and money, okay? And that way, like let's say you had $100,000, you could actually try 10 companies, right? So you win. If 90% of them are gonna statistically fail, your one will win, yeah? It's just a numbers game, super easy. And then you validate by running experiments. Experiment A, experiment B, experiment C. And this is the loop. You start with an idea, you build your VP canvas. So you put sticky notes. This is what I think the customer wants. This is what he enjoys, his pains and gains. And you put sticky notes about how your product relieves their pains, how your product stimulates their gains, and the features that match their requirements. So you're literally building or whatever you're doing for the customer to solve their problem. If you stay customer-centric focused and solve their problem, eventually, if you find something big enough, they'll pay you for it. And that's the concept behind it. So you found your cow. You don't touch your cow until you've actually mapped out your customers and you know what they want from your cow. Because maybe they're milk, and then you don't kill them. And then actually you're producing milk for a long time. Then you measure. You go out, in this case, it's testing your customer assumptions, because you make a whole bunch of assumptions about what the customers want, what they're willing to buy or not. What's your biggest headache? One hypothesis we had was, we're really concerned in the beginning, should we stock up lots of fabric, right? Because we're an e-commerce site and it costs money. We didn't have a lot of money. And we were super convinced that we should buy like 5X black, right? Fabric compared to like navy blue. Everybody wears black. Thank God we didn't. Thank God we tested it. And after selling a little bit, we found that the blue navy sells 2 to 1 every time, despite seasonality. And that allows you to actually build that into your business and stock up the right stuff, rather than making assumptions about what you think the market wants, what you think the customer wants. Because no one pays you to think what they want and guess what they want. They pay you for creating value for them. Okay? So you go out, you talk to them and you validate, you learn, and then you come back and you basically take out the stickies, right? You throw away all your wrong assumptions and you put up new assumptions and improved assumptions. And you repeat the cycle again and again and again and again. And you're not building and you're not excessively investing. You keep repeating the cycle and you pivot, you redesign your canvas, and you've saved yourself really ultimately time and money, a lot of it. And here's a real one in action. So this one is Benapple, the one we sold. We had a VP canvas in one of my co-founders' house. That's her house, Bianca. And you can see like all the crazy stickies. And we'd meet like on average once a day, once every other day. And basically we'd give all the feedback, all our interviews, all our meetings on the HR front, on the insurance front, on the broker's front. And we'd be shocked. We'd have amazing lessons and cancellations of assumptions. We were, oh, you know what? The insurance companies, even though they have all the money, they ain't gonna pay. They're not our payers. Amazing, because of 1, 2, 3. The brokers, though, are desperate for money. They might pay. Change it. Okay? And thereby, everything that we built subsequently was creating value for the ultimate customer. And I think Asim will do a deep dive on this particular part, but ultimately, the design aspect, the design thinking and building aspect really has to be centered about what you observe from your customer. This is the what, and the customer is the why, not the other way around. Yeah? And you are not in this equation. Your ego is not in this equation whatsoever. Yeah? And then that puts you into the product customer fit. This is the typical business model canvas that most people have seen. Yeah? And that's when this and this fit, that's when it gets really interesting. When you start making a couple of $1,000s every month. So the first page is customer discovery and customer validation. This is where you're getting out of the building. This is where you're spending a lot of time, but not so much money, on validating your hypothesis. And then later on, it's customer creation, it's scaling, it's growth, raising capital, all that good jazz. So I've taken a photo here of the lean canvas that I built for Ethan, eventually Benapple. So I've got here 69th iteration. I've lost the count. And just to give you an idea, if you imagine the business model canvas that most people do is like a big wheel, okay? The VP canvas, which is more important, is the little wheel, yeah? On average, you need to turn, change, pivot the VP canvas 15 times for one big change of the business model canvas, right? People tend to focus on the business. Change the revenues, who's paying me, who's my customer, blah, blah, blah. It's all a distraction. It's all a distraction. It's your VP canvas that needs to change all the time so you learn as quickly and cheaply as possible who your customer is and what's the product that you've made that solves their problem. Once you know that, then you can start to build on the business. How am I going to scale? How do I get my channels? What are my costs? Everyone seems to work top-down. Wrong. It's bottoms-up. Lots of work in the beginning, lots of turn of that small wheel for the VP canvas to get the big wheel turn on the BMC. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. So just to sort of wind it up before I finish this off, I wanted to just leave some pearls of wisdom, none of which are mine, from Steve Blank, who's sort of like the father of entrepreneurship, for lack of a better term. There are no facts inside your building or your head. Get outside the building and test them. Don't judge. So I give courses on what I call the mom test, and how to go out and conduct interviews without sort of being biased, asking questions when it comes to pricing. How do I price this thing? And getting that from your customer, potentially. Asking feedback from your customer and try to negate that human nature of trying to always say, yes, this is amazing, but in reality, they think it's shit. Humans do that a lot. We're sort of kind to each other that way. Be curious. That's a really important trait that I think people that want to go into entrepreneurship should have, or at least their partner should have. Always wanting to learn, being lifelong learners. I think many of you here are. Enjoy the mess. That's me being painted on by one of my sons and the other one sort of eating. If you like stability, then entrepreneurship is not for you. You have to be really comfortable in the eye of the storm. Yeah, you have to really be super chilled about not knowing where your monthly salary is coming from. Yeah, that's why they always joke and say like entrepreneurs are a little bit crazy because I think I don't want to say they're crazy, but I think there's a little element of being very calm when things are just dynamic. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So if you're a stress bucket and you like stability, don't go into entrepreneurship. Be prepared to be misunderstood for a long time. I get really excited when people laugh at my crazy ideas because I think I'm onto something. When we started, not standard, we used to tell people we think people are going to buy custom suits online. I literally got called crazy by a couple of big investors who I loved visiting like 2 years later saying, yeah, what do you think of me now? So yeah, be prepared to be misunderstood. And then the last one, finally, be prepared to fail and enjoy it, right? I don't want to sound discouraging, but your default state is a failure. Embrace it, love it, welcome it, and try and unfail it as quickly as possible. Cool. Okay, so I think with that, I know it's a lot to absorb and take in. I've tried to pile through it as quickly as possible. I know we're quite late. I'm going to open it up to questions, right, to everybody else. Do ask. I would prefer you ask a question now. If someone asks me a really cool question afterwards, I'll actually be a douchebag and not answer you, because I think then everybody else is missing out. Because if it's good enough for you to ask, then everybody else should learn from it as well.
I've got a mic for people that have questions. I'm going to start it off.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Tarig. It was, you didn't disappoint, and yeah. That's the first sip of coffee I've seen you take. You're just walking around with the cup in your hand.
I know. I've been like dying to, but I couldn't stop. Right.
So my question is,
People have been waiting all day.
the content is not unfamiliar to some of us. I'm not fully convinced on some of the points, particularly around the emphasis on identifying a problem, product market fit, iteration, and it's not that I disagree with it, but it's kind of like what the chicken and the egg, because yes, identifying a problem, and then you go through design thinking and then iteration, but how many amazingly successful startups have iterated to something that was completely different from where they started?
Yes.
And so so the point I want to make is not that I disagree with that point, but I think you should not obsess over it, because if you obsess over the problem at the expense of everything else, you're going to miss out on opportunities to iterate and actually end up in a very different place from where you started from.
So I do, okay, so I'll agree and disagree with you at the same time. I actually don't think we're saying anything different. If you guys remember, we started not standard, what ended up as a e-tailer, as a cowboy boot company, right? Amazon, anybody know what they started off as? Books, right? I mean, super genius guy started in this very specific niche. Now he's taking over the world. Facebook, anybody know how Facebook started? Yeah, it was a student hooking up dating site for Harvard. Let's be honest, right? That's what it was about. Like, I like this. Actually like him later. What other stuff? Benapple actually started as a lead generation for insurance companies, because I knew I wanted to play in that space. But it actually ended up being an HR platform, completely different field, right? The way we made money was exactly the same, and that was a trick to it. But coming back to your question, Bernard, I think I would say do obsess about the problem, but don't obsess about your product. A lot of people obsess about their product, right? They don't obsess about solving the customer's problem. Because if you solve the customer problem, you'll by de facto end up with a product that wildly surprised you, right? When Elon Musk started, his companies that eventually got acquired and became eBay, the first, does anyone know their first product that sold between matching? Yeah, exactly. Those suites, right? Where you, yeah, I know. That was PayPal, right? It was nuts. Who would have thought? So whenever you go into your ideation stage, you're finding your problem phase, do get sort of, passionate and crazy about solving the problem. That's awesome. But a lot of people fall in love with their product, with their idea, with their business. And that's the danger. That's the part that people tend to marry, and they hold on to it for so long that it eventually leads to their company death, right?
So again, I would say that we're talking about the same thing in different ways, where
Yes.
if someone's obsessing about the problem, they are by default obsessing about some iteration of their product. And
Yeah, you've got to
it's
show
the
a little
point-
bit of flexibility, right? And let the customer drive you towards
That's
what they want.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
GlassQube
And I've-
is a great example of that. When
Yes.
we started off, we did the beta test, built a fake website before we spent a penny to see if the demand was there, and it wasn't. And then we went ahead. But at the same time, we launched with a focus on startups, not realizing that the startup market was not where we thought it was. And then we iterated, and now we're in a very different place commercially and strategically than we were a year ago. So iteration, agree with it 100%. But I think the way I would look at it is everything you said was right, but I would not obsess over any of it. Everything has its time and place. You have to kind of be fluid across the whole spectrum of strategy and the way of thinking about it.
Yes. The other
So-
challenge as well in sort of the startup lifespan, especially in the early ages, there's so much to do. There's so many variables, and a lot of people get overwhelmed. The trick in that is you got to be a bit ruthless with your time, and literally 80-20 everything, right? What is going to have my biggest impact with the least amount of effort, right? Break it down. Okay, I'll give you a useful tip. So every morning I sit down and I write like all the crap that I have to do, and I have a lot of crap to do, right? I'm a lister. Yeah, I don't know if you're one of those, or you write a list and you got to scratch them off. If you scratch everything off, you had a great day. If you scratch one thing off, you had a shit day, right? I'm one of those people. And we only have so much brain power, energy, time during the day. So what I do is, and this is particularly useful skill, especially in the early days of a startup, is I'd write down my entire list, and then I'd cluster them. Because most of the time you're doing stuff that's sort of related. So I'd be like, okay, well, these 5 are all to do with capital raising. And these 5 are all to do with like operations and fixing that shit. And these 3 are to do with something else. And I'd cluster them. And then I'd say, out of these 3, which are the most important? And I'd rank those, right? And I'd be ruthless about it. If I don't raise money now, I'm dead in 2 months. That's got to take priority. And I start my day that way, right? So that's a useful tip in terms of time management, I guess, because time and money are the most important 2 resources in a startup. And you got to make really sharp decisions all the time.
Any questions?
Yep. Go and ask away. There's one right here.
Yeah. The question is basically, it's in your first startup with your customized suits. You mentioned that the most important thing over there, this is exactly you actually mentioned afterwards, was it like 2/3 of your customers never bought a suit online before? So like the reason why it was successful, I think, or I guess this is the question, is it because you changed customer behavior?
Oh, great question. Great question. And these are the kind of great questions that out of every experiment, a great experiment sometimes even gives you a no, but at least even better questions that come out of it. Like those are really exciting. Sometimes no's are more exciting than yeses, okay? And by the way, that's one of the many questions that we asked ourselves when that process came up. Were we changing customer behavior? So I'll answer that question very specifically because you want to talk about that company. It wasn't my first company. My first company was failed orange Coca-Cola, by the way, at the age of 7. So specifically when we ran that experiment, we had a positive result, right? And what do? I actually started getting on the phone to talk to customers in the United States. And that sort of confirmed that men will buy a suit custom online. Great. The interesting thing out of that is when we started talking to them, none of them had a clue what custom is. None of them. They just saw a better price point. So we knew price was a driver. It was cheaper. And then we sold it as it being better. We said, okay, let's follow it up. When they got the suit and they got it, they loved it. What was really interesting is when we did the financial models, we were predicting like on average men would buy a suit every 2 to 3 years, right? What was really interesting is no, that contracted to 6 months. Because we never could have predicted consumer behavior. They'd basically be like, I'm never buying that shitty pajama suit, you know, ever again. Let me just go back to it really quickly. Here it is, right? I'm never buying one of those. It's not showing. I'm never buying one of those ever again. And that actually really changed a lot of the drivers on our financial model. We never would have predicted that had we not done those experiments. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So say if I have, I've studied the market and I've studied the customer's needs.
Okay.
How do I approach funding companies or people for funding?
So you've done customer research. Do you think you know what the problem is? How much data do you have to validate that problem? Like, is it a real problem or is it in your head?
I've done quite some good research on the problem, and I've talked to one of the organizations responsible for that, and
Okay.
they like the idea.
Why do you need money?
So I can expand my team, and
So you want to expand your... So wait a minute. Have you already created something that people are paying you money for?
the thing is, what I'm creating is not for like regular people. It's for like a government to purchase, not for
So
regular
the
customers.
government's the customer.
Yeah.
I get that. They're your special customer, by the way. But the government's the customer. That's fine. Have you sold them anything?
No.
Have they said, yeah, we're going to buy tomorrow? Then you don't really have anything yet. Don't scale your team. You have nothing to scale. You're making a classic mistake of jumping to, I want to hire people, I want to build a company, when no one's written you a contract. We sold suits, and we didn't even have any suits. I think there was like, who was it? Virgin founder, who basically says, you know, if someone is offering you a job, an opportunity, even if you don't know how, have faith in yourself and just take it and work it out later, right? If you hit a node and you find a government entity that really wants a service or a product, right? Make sure that they're ready to pay you, or somebody else is. Otherwise, it's not worth your time. You can't build a business out of it. So I really don't want you to go and capital raise, you know, in order to expand a team, because all those are scaling activities, right? But from what I'm hearing is you're not at scaling. There's nothing to scale. If you're telling me I had a product and I sold to a couple and I'm making $10,000 a month, but I'm frustrated because I need more people, okay, maybe then you need to scale. But if you haven't sold anything, if you haven't made a product and connected with a customer, you haven't really found that, you know, okay, is that helpful? So I'm super direct because I hate people wasting time and money. Okay, her hand was next. Young lady there.
I just think with the quote you're looking for is Richard Branson. He said
Yes.
entrepreneurship is like jumping out of an airplane and building the parachute on the way down.
No, that was Reid Hoffman. Yeah.
I think he was paraphrasing.
Was he? Yeah, and he was like, said also eating glass or something crazy like that.
Okay, thank you so much for such a presentation.
Pleasure.
What would take